with a video
Yeah.
to promote it. Okay, so officially welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, like from when you arrived in Australia and when you changed languages? So your first language is Italian, right?
Yes, that's right. So I was born in the north of Italy, in Merate, which is in the Lombardia region, and my family is originally from Sicily. But my dad was born in Australia, so we moved.
Mm.
We moved. The whole family moved to Australia when I was about 8 years old.
Ah,
And even though we had learned a little bit of English at school, I was not proficient at
yeah.
all. I had no English language skills, so I had to kind of learn when I was 8.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so starting from scratch.
So at home you spoke Italian even with your dad.
Yes, my mum and dad. Yeah, my mum's also an Italian teacher, so it was a priority that we
Ah,
spoke
okay.
Italian
Yeah, that's
at
important.
home. Yeah, and I still speak Italian to my parents. Yeah.
So who do you speak Italian to? Your parents or maybe friends, other relatives?
Yeah, I mean, I speak it to my mum and my dad, to relatives, even my wife's family. They're Italian, so I speak to them in Italian. With my wife, I mostly speak English, but sometimes I might just start speaking Italian, and she
Ah,
understands. So even though she was,
but she speaks English. She's Australian too.
yeah, she was born here, but her family spoke Italian when she was a child. So her first
Ah,
language basically was Italian, even though she was born and grew up here. And then she just picked up English as soon as she went to school.
okay. Okay, okay. So, and do you feel that you change personalities at all when you are speaking Italian to your parents and when you're speaking English to other people or not?
Yes, I mean, I don't know about personalities, but there is a different quality in my voice, and there is a
Yeah.
different I guess intention or energy, I guess, in my sound. We can call it personality if you like. Yeah, it's a little more intimate, even with a mentor of mine that I'm working on at the moment for a show. He's Italian, and we go from Italian to English, and sometimes I feel like with Italian it carries more of an intimacy.
Mhm.
It's a language of family, of when I feel something that's quite internal and I want to express it. And when I speak in English, it's a little bit more direct. It's about what I'm going to
Mhm.
do, my actions, where I'm going to go. But when it comes to what I'm feeling, what I want to express, the language of family, the language of my heritage and my ancestors, Italian is really the key to get me to open that aspect up for myself. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I wonder if that is because it's your first language or because it is Italian. Italian is a very romantic family language.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah, like we will never know, but because yeah, it's your first language. That's why it feels like that to you, but it's also Italian. That is the family kind of culture.
yeah, yeah, I do feel that when I speak Italian, there's a level of intimacy that happens between me and the person that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
That is less formal. I think English gives me a little bit more of a formality. Um, yeah, it's a little bit more of an action language versus an
Yeah.
emotional language. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So for me, it's the same with Spanish. And that's why I chose to write in English to detach a little bit from certain topics that it was raw for me to talk or, yeah, I just couldn't handle talking about it. Is it the same for you? Are there any topics that feel too close to home in Italian?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a writer. I do write sometimes for my work, but I don't. I've written also, yeah, mostly for work, and sometimes to transcribe improvisations and things I do.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think when I do improvise in Italian, for example, something very ancient comes through, particularly because I do a lot of mask work. I studied commedia dell'arte, so when even though those archetypes in Commedia dell'arte are not specific to Italian culture. These archetypes or these stock characters exist in every culture.
Mhm.
We have pantalones that can be Spanish, Australians, Italians. Yes, there could be a merchant, an Italian Venetian merchant. That's the specific archetype, but really it's a universal archetype.
Mhm.
But I find that when I put that mask on, I automatically go into the Italian stingy northerner
Mhm.
who feels very drawn to money, or with the Arlecchino, it brings out a bit more of the Savana in me, the Sicilian, the mischievous, the cheeky language. So there are different, I guess, dialects that I'm drawn to when I play, and sometimes it begins with Italian, and then eventually I go into an English just to communicate, so the audience knows what I'm saying. But in
Yeah.
order to get into the state of the mask, into the play of the mask, a way to start, my brain actually thinks in Italian.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. My brain goes straight to Italian, and then eventually English starts to come through.
Yeah, yeah, that is fascinating because it starts with emotion, and then you will like translate it to English for the purposes of the audience. But yeah, that is fascinating. And so you do improvisation, but have you, when you were working with Josh, were you working on a play or
With John for Spot.
no, 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 with Josh Samuels?
Oh yes, Josh
Yeah.
Samuels. Yes, so I worked with Josh. Josh was really wonderful and great, really encouraging in helping me kind of explore a writing process. He was very great at building a sense of structure around the next story that I wanted to tell. Yeah, so the writing process was challenging, but that was predominantly in English. Like it really put me in my thinking brain, in
Uh-huh.
my analysis brain. And I think, as Josh rightly says, like just build structure, and then from there you can start to play and improvise and so on. So yeah, when I was working with Josh, most of the writing and most of the conversations were in English.
Uh-huh. It was a play. Did you write a play with him
I
or?
haven't, no, well, no, it was the beginning of a structure for a
Uh-huh.
play, which I'm working on at the moment. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. So the Italian didn't even appear. You never even thought, well, I would like to express this idea in Italian. No, everything was in English and
Well, the structure. So like articulating the structure of the story. So for
Mhm.
example, he would ask me, what is the genre? And I would say the genre is a spiritual physical comedy.
Uh-huh.
That's the genre. But then now that I'm starting to play with the material and play with the structure, I am actually accessing a little bit of Italian to help me get into the characters. Um, because it also relates. The story is actually connected. It's based on the story of Saint Francis of Assisi.
Uh-huh.
So I'm exploring that character, and I'm also interested actually in creating a gibberish, a
Uh-huh.
Grammelot with Saint Francis. So I'm not necessarily speaking Italian, but I'm kind of speaking in this made up Italian language.
Ah. And why is that?
I don't know. It could be. Io non saprei, Santo Padre, come queste cose qua che succedono,
Uh-huh.
non lo so. Like could be a little bit of Italian, a little bit of gibberish, a Grammelot per se. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I wonder that could really work because the audience don't necessarily need to speak Italian. They understand, well, he's speaking Italian now,
Yeah.
or not.
I mean, yeah, it's like they speaking Italian, but is he speaking Italian? And
Uh,
the Italians would be like, "Wait, that doesn't sound really
that's not
Italian. I can
Italian.
hear some." It's really just it has an effect, I think, on the audience's brains where they start to, when they hear English, their brains perk up and they go, I'm hearing the information that's been shared here. But when you start to go into gibberish or Grammelot, it's a more emotional language because we're dealing with sounds and shapes and words that the body has pleasure in expressing. So the way we receive that information as an audience, I think, is different than hearing a language that
Yeah.
tells us how we're feeling or what we think about that person. a gibberish or another language when we don't speak it and we're hearing it, we're listening to the melody, the rhythms, the
Hmm.
musicality of it. So it has a different impact on our bodies.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't even know about that. What was that term? Grammalot?
Grammelot, yeah, yeah.
Grammalot.
So it's a combination of sounds and made up words that that connect. So if I wanted to do a Spanish Grammelot,
Mhm.
and like, say quiero hablar un poquito de templo siete, ¿cómo se dice? De tortillas de, sí, sí, siempre
Huh.
you know what I mean? I would just
Sí,
play with
sí.
this kind of sound, and I'm not speaking Spanish, but
Yeah, yeah,
there is a sense of Spanish, and as long as I'm clear about what I'm communicating, then the audience will get the gist of what I'm saying, because also the
yeah,
physicality that comes along. And that's actually how the Commedia dell'arte actors traveled the world. Like, they didn't speak French or German, or, they ended up even in England. And they also had very specific dialects that they spoke. But because of the gestures and the physicality and the rhythm of the language, they were understood by no, all audiences. So the world of the play um, transcended, in a way, language.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Um, so, and also you mentioned before when we were talking before that you did some exercises with students in your workshops that were you intended to bring their first languages. Is
Yeah.
it this that you're telling me, or something else also with the first languages?
It's slightly something else. It's based on the work and the pedagogy of my dear colleague and friend Christine Landon Smith.
Hmm.
She's developed a pedagogy that's based on, she calls it unique identity training in actors. So what she does, and what is often common in workshops, to bring a greater sense of self, to bring more of ourselves into an acting work, and not prioritizing the text, but rather, how does this body want to express the text? Um, there is a process of going through certain improvisations using the vernaculars of the first languages, and specific vernaculars of the actors. So if I'm Italian, you're Spanish, and your first language is Spanish, um, then we would improvise a scene. I would be speaking Italian, you would be speaking Spanish, but because we're clear of what the circumstances are in the scene and what we want from each other. So it's a breakup scene, I'm leaving, or you're leaving me because you fall in love with someone else, and you speak to me in Spanish and I speak to you back in Italian. It forces us to really listen to each
Uh-huh.
other, but also brings up something quite personal, and quite unique, that only we can really access. Only you and I can play this scene this way. Even though we might not understand what we're saying, we are getting a gist because of the musicality of our languages and our deep listening of how we're playing the scene together.
And so this is a warm up before you start doing something else. You would have them do something like this.
In a way, it's a warm up, but it's also the how you set up the play between these two people. Because
Hmm.
actually, when I start to improvise in Italian, you start to improvise in Spanish, we're going to be good. We're bringing a
Yeah.
lot of ourselves, and we're really deep listening to develop this beautiful back and forth that's happening between us. So then, eventually, once we get to text, the idea is to keep this beautiful openness that happens between us, and then allow the English text to come through. But I don't lose my Italianness, and
Hmm.
you won't lose your kind of South American is
Argentinianness.
Argentinianness.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're not saying we have to speak English now, and we kind of go into this robot version of ourselves, but we're
Uh-huh.
allowing ourselves to inhabit our bodies and our rhythms. But now we just got this text that happens to be in English.
Uh-huh. That's very interesting because what I'm thinking is if I were the student here and you ask me, well, do this scene in Spanish, I would freak out because I maybe can do it in English, but in Spanish is much harder for me, which is very like funny. Why is it harder? Because as I mentioned before, I use the language as a mask.
Yeah.
in order to do scary things. So, have you ever had some kind of issue, not issue, but like some student maybe, uh, I don't know, getting cold feet because they have to speak their first language or not?
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes there is, yeah, as you said, there's a lot of vulnerability, or openness that might come by asking students to communicate in this first language. Um, there's a bit of shame behind that. So I think what's important is to just think, you know, just to kind of, in acting, especially with acting, we want to bring a sense of openness and vulnerability in our work, because it makes us, it just makes us a little bit more courageous, and it shows that we really care. Vulnerability is actually when we really care about something, and there's the potential for success, but there's also the potential to be hurt. The word vulnerabile, in Latin, means
Hmm.
to the potential to be wounded, right?
Hmm.
So, we're not poking at that vulnerability, but actually what we're trying to, what Christine is in this pedagogy that she's developed is trying to invite actors to do, to my understanding, is not denying that part of themselves when it comes to performance.
Hmm.
Not to say, when I come into a rehearsal room, I'm Italian. You're Argentinian. Why do we have to keep that at the door and pretend that we are, you know, now doing Shakespeare, and we have to speak in a
Hmm.
Shakespearean way, including our own cultural identities is actually going to be an asset to improving our performance, but also it's bringing up more musicality, more rhythms, more options, more opportunity to discover a deeper sense of play.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's very interesting. Um, and do you have any play that is right now is on, like in theaters or on?
I'm working on something that hopefully should be on, as an exploration mid-year, around July. Um, that was the one that I was working with Josh.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so look, it's still very early days. There's not much I can talk about at the moment,
Uh-huh.
but that's the plan. Yeah, to kind of, have a bit of a showcase for that soon.
And what about this one, Spot? It was on 2021, I think it was on, or no?
Yeah, and last, so 2021 and 2022, so for 2 years. Yeah, we did 2 seasons. Yeah, and Spot was based on my experience as a migrant coming to
Hmm.
Australia, and particularly how this question of identity. Do I come to Australia and, you know with a name like Fabio, I think people are very clear of where they want to place me. Ah, you're Italian.
Hmm.
And when you're a young, artist, particularly an actor, this question of identity is really tricky, because, as you
Hmm.
say, Zoe, you know we're looking for that mask to fit in. How do I function in this society? Oh yes, English gives me this power, but with me, I found that the more I actually leaned into my Italianness and celebrated it, the more I felt, I guess, fulfilled as an artist.
Hmm.
But I was constantly battling this identity within me.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what? You know, because there are microaggressions that sometimes can come up in this country, where people might say things assumingly like, "Ah, do your parents own a pizza restaurant?" In an audition, someone asked me that once, and I was
Uh-huh.
automatically a bit, I laughed about it, but it is a microaggression. It's an
Yeah, yeah.
assumption that because I'm Italian, my parents are automatically running restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
um, so there is a little bit of shame around that, and I know there was a part of my life that I desperately just wanted to be seen as a white English actor. You know.
Uh-huh. Actually, yeah, I wanted to come back to that. That moment when you were 8 and you started school here, was there a big struggle about the language? Do you
Yeah, so
remember?
Spot was about dealing about that. So the
Uh-huh.
story starts with actually a true event that happened, which is I came. Um, Obviously, I was 8 years old, so people would be reading novels like, Goosebumps or
Mhm.
um, Harry Potter, or kind of slightly bigger books for young 10-year-olds.
Mhm.
And I couldn't read those books. So when everyone was reading during English, I was taken to a different room, separate from everybody else, and was given Spot. I don't know if you know Spot. It's a little yellow dog
Ah.
with a spot, and it's a kid's book. So it's one
Uh-huh.
sentence at a time. Spot plays with the ball. Spot runs. So when I was reading these books that are for really, very young people, I would say maybe 3 or 4 year olds learning how to read,
Mhm.
I felt this deep sense of shame. And that's why
Oh.
the show was about Spot, this kind of grotesque incarnation of this character, this over the top buffon,
Mhm.
making fun of this Mario
Yeah.
guy, saying you'll never make it, you'll never be enough, you'll never catch up to everybody else. And that shame that has lived with me for a very long time. And now, because of the show, I feel like I've actually been able to express it. And because of that, a catharsis has happened in a way where I feel less shame. But throughout my whole life, I've always felt like I was never enough. And I think it started in that moment when I realized I'm not like everybody else, and I need to read basically little kid books and catch up.
Mhm.
So I was constantly playing catch up throughout my schooling years.
And do you remember when you lost that feeling? If you ever
Yeah,
lost that
well,
feeling?
I don't know if I completely lost it, but I think having expressed it through the performance of
Mm.
Spot, um, I felt like I was able to release it. There's a famous saying in acting that what you don't play will eventually play you.
Mhm.
So if
Yeah.
you at a young age were very lively and always loud, and your parents kept saying, "Be quiet," you know, "You're too loud, stay still, close your legs," that repression, right? Eventually, when we grow up, that part of us, even though we've repressed it and are now no longer loud, that part of us still lives in us. So if we don't give it the opportunity to be expressed, it will eventually come up and express itself through anger or rage or violence, even
Mhm.
in the most unexpected places. So I think because I gave myself the permission to play this little voice in my head, this trauma, let's
Mhm.
say, that I had since childhood,
Mhm.
some sort of healing has occurred. I feel so. I still feel like a foreigner, and I still feel a little bit
Uh-huh.
like I'm still playing catch up with the rest of the world. But I now have a different outlook about it. There's less shame, and there's a bit more of a naivety, or a little bit more of a little nudge. Like that's what actually makes me unique.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's the point that brought me to do the podcast. That for me, it was the same. It was like a problem, like an obstacle. But then I thought, well, maybe it's not an obstacle. Maybe it's a superpower. Maybe it's a different edge.
Yeah.
It's freshness, something new to bring. So yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for all your anecdotes and stories and input. It's been great. I'm sure that all the listeners will very much appreciate our chat. I wish I could see Spot. That's something that sounds like I want to watch. Is there like a video of the? No.
Unfortunately, not. No, I don't have. I just have a little like a brief little trailer, but at the moment I've kind of moved on from the production,
Uh,
just because I feel like even though it's a story, I feel like I'm just kind of ready to explore other things at the moment. Yeah, but if it does pop up in the future, I'll be sure to keep you posted.
yeah. So I will leave all of your information, anyways, in the description. So if anybody wants to see your place, or you offer workshops, right, of improv.
Yeah, in clowning and voice. Fitzmaurice voice work. So it's really about the opportunity to express these parts of ourselves and unleash the parts that have been repressed and set them free.
Uh-huh. I may try it myself. I have to confess, I'm very scared of that. Very scared, but I may do it.
Yeah, well, if there's, they say fear is excitement without breath. So as long as you're breathing and you let yourself feel it, it could be really exciting.
Yeah, so I may try it. Well, that's it. Thanks so much. Is there anything else you want to add, or?
No, thank you so much, Zoe. I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I agree with you. Like, I think, having another language, or even in acting, sometimes when we have to do accents, like speaking American or whatever it is, it gives us a different personality, as you say, and that's really fascinating. So congratulations on your podcast, and I can't wait to hear all the other guests that you have on and to hear your insights on it. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you.